1,300.
Wow. Whoa, I nearly saw that.
Most thyroid patients, for example, will have worse menopauses and worse periods throughout their life.
Oh, wow.
Just all goes together.
Oh, God. You don't get a break.
Yeah.
No.
No. Yeah.
No. But it is genuinely wrecking her life and her confidence and everything.
Oh, you just wouldn't want to leave the house. Welcome to Clickable, the podcast brought to you by HDE Agency. Dr. Conway.
Hello.
Welcome to Clickable.
Thanks.
It is wonderful to have you here. The reason you're here is because it is Women's Health Awareness Month this May. And the particular things that we want to talk to you about, I feel, and you might agree, that there isn't actually that much awareness around them.
Very true.
For women. So I think best place to start is if you could just give us a bit of background about who you are, what you do, why you do it. That would be great.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Dr. Georgina Conway. I am GP doctor by training. I now run something called the Thyroid Clinic and have done for the last 4 years, set up in October 2020. In the middle of COVID, so in the middle of a lockdown, actually. So I had to set it up all virtually. The reason I set it up, I have something called Hashimoto's. Hashimoto's is an autoimmune thyroid disease. It was picked up after my third child. So I had 3 kids under the age of 5. I was tired. And went to my GP and said, look, I don't feel good. There's something not right. And I was told many times over that I had 3 kids under the age of 5. I was a doctor. What should I expect? And to be fair, they had a point. I did, and I was leading a busy life. However, there is, and as a lot of my patients will also say, there's a difference in tiredness. There's like a wall that hits with thyroid disease. So they did do some bloods on me. Everything's fine, off you go. So I started seeing an acupuncturist to see if she could help me and help them give me some energy back, etc. And actually it was her that got me started on this journey, to be honest. She said, get yourself some private bloods, which I did. And lo and behold, there it was. There was my Hashimoto's. It was something I expected because my gran had it, my mum has it. So I knew it was going to come to me, but nevertheless, getting that bit of paper and it going, there it is, was a bit scary and a bit, lifelong chronic disease to manage. So that was that. Went to the GP, did a lot of research on it, went to the doctors with a pile of information and said, look, this is what it says. I have symptoms, I have Hashimoto's, I have a family history. I think some treatment might help me. And they did agree in the end when I had that evidence. And so I started on the first form of treatment, which is something called levothyroxine, and was on that for many years, really, and reasonably all right on that for many years. And things did improve. I then subsequently started working for a private medical company. I was medical director of that company. And in that private medical area, we saw a lot of patients with thyroid issues who weren't getting the help that they felt they needed. And I suppose the more I kept researching, obviously, as you do through the years, and seeing what else came up and what else I could do to help myself, both in ways you eat and what other supplements you can take, et cetera, and I started to implement those changes on my patients within the clinic. And suddenly found that I was making a difference. These patients were coming back going, I feel so much better. Or I had one lady, for example, who hadn't been able to get pregnant for 3 years.
Wow.
She was just about to go and have a laparoscopy, so investigation to find out why.
Right.
I saw her 3 months later, she came back and pregnant.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, wow. And literally all I'd done for her was give her some advice about supplementation with her levothyroxine. I didn't change any of her actual hormones. It was just supplements. And at that point I was like, this is interesting. There's something going on here. I also, in that same clinic, had a lot of American patients. There was an agency nearby that brought over Americans to work with them. And they have a very different way of thinking about thyroid over there. And they have different medications available to them. And I saw these guys and I was like, gosh, you're really well on this. Wow, isn't that interesting? And I suppose then started to develop more interest about what it was going on in America and Canada, actually, are similarly quite high up and well informed about thyroid issues. So I started to research all of that side of things. And again, learned from my patients, actually, a lot of them, and developed a bit of a following within that clinic. COVID hit, lockdown, whatever it was, March 2020, wasn't it, the first lockdown we had? And that clinic shut, the medical clinic shut. At the time, we obviously didn't know what COVID was going to bring. So we just stopped everything. And I went back into working in hospital. So even though I said I'm a GP, I've always done sort of acute medicine side of things. I've never actually worked in a GP surgery on a full-time basis. So I went back into working at the coalface in Southmead Hospital, and that came with its own issues, but that's a whole different matter. But what happened is I literally had sort of 3 months out, and within that 3-4 months, my patients came to me going, "Where's Dr. Conway?
What do I do?
What am I going to do? How do I manage my thyroid? I can't get my bloods. I can't." I was like, "Oh, good point." My dad, who sadly died of COVID, November 2020, he was always the biggest advocate for women's health. He was amazing. And we're going to talk about menopause and perimenopause, but the other issue that I've also had is issues with my periods, and I'll talk about that later. But it was always my dad that I'd call every month in floods of tears going, "My world's ending." You know that thing? Everything's gone wrong. And he'd be like, "George, do you think it might be your period?" And he'd be like, "No, it's not my period."
It's just usually your mom that you call. I love that.
I know. He was awesome at it. And almost, I think my mum didn't have period issues, so she didn't really get it. Whereas my dad, almost as a man, was just like, "But this is awful. This is what your hormones are doing." I mean, if this was a man, I'd be crying in the corner, you know. So he really felt, he was very empathetic towards it. So it was always him that would be like, "Are you all right? Do you think it might be a period?" Maybe. And then literally the next day I'd be like,
"You're right.
Damn it, you're right." So anyway, so he persuaded me. He was like, you need to do something about it. And he'd been saying it for years. You need to do something about this for these women who are suffering with their hormones, be it thyroid hormones, sex hormones, whatever. So I bit the bullet. And I just went, well, what harm does it do? I can make a very cheap website, get it up, get my patients. I literally had about 28, 30 patients at the start.
That's great to start with, by the way. Like 28, 30, you kind of, breeze past that part.
Just you on your own as well.
Massive success.
I've now got about 1,300.
Wow.
Whoa! I mean, you saw that.
Wow. That's
I've now got about 1,300.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
So I just started the clinic and saw what happened. Through working at the private clinic, I had links with labs and pharmacies and the Thyroid UK organisation, who were great for information about thyroid issues in particular. I got my name on their list, and it just grew, and it grew exponentially almost.
Wow.
So from 28, 30 patients, we've now had 1,300 come through our clinic.
That's crazy.
That's bonkers.
But it just shows the need for it, right? And the value you're adding, and the care you give.
So that's how it all started, and it is not what I ever expected. I thought I might be doing 1 or 2 hours a week, but it's just grown and grown and grown.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Incredible.
So there you
That is
go.
incredible. That's an incredible story. Really
There's my
inspiring.
story.
No, yeah, really inspirational. Just kind of honing in a little bit on menopause and perimenopause and kind of thyroid issues as a whole.
Yeah.
Why do you think that they are often overlooked or misunderstood?
I think that's a difficult question to answer, but so all three issues, thyroid issues, are mainly women.
Mm-hmm.
Thyroid issues tend to be 10 to 1 in ratio of men to women.
Mm-hmm.
Perimenopause obviously is all women.
Yeah.
And is inevitably a fact of life. Thyroid issues clearly aren't, but perimenopause and menopause are a fact of life.
Mm-hmm.
Why are they overlooked? Because the symptoms, and it's one of my favourite words, the symptoms are nebulous.
Nebulous.
They're nebulous.
Okay.
So they're not, you don't go and you go, I've got pain in my abdomen, or I've got bleeding coming from my bottom, or whatever. People go and they go, look, I just don't feel right. I can't put my finger on it. I just don't feel right. I'm tired. I'm putting on weight. I'm anxious.
People talk about the fog.
I've got brain fog.
Yeah.
Brain fog's a big one in
It
all
could be
three.
anything, really, couldn't it?
And that's the trouble.
Yeah.
You know, I've got aching in my joints. I've got whatever. The symptoms are so nebulous. They're not an obvious symptom. And so it's very easy to put those symptoms down to tiredness, to you've got 3
Stress.
kids and a job. What do you expect?
Yeah.
You're anxious, you're depressed,
It's
you're
your
stressed.
lifestyle. Yeah.
You're eating too much, you're eating crap.
Yeah.
You're not
Eating too little,
exercising.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to palm off those things. And unless you actually listen to the whole thing, you don't get listened to.
Yeah.
And unless you've got someone who goes, well, actually, that actually sounds very hormonal to me, it's very easy to pass off.
Right. It's funny because we had a chat with another doctor last month, Dr. Jenny Bailey, and she's created this amazing product for IBS sufferers, and she said a similar thing. Kind of similar, but they kind of used, you've got IBS, and off you go.
Yes.
Yeah, you've just got, it's fine.
You've just got IBS. You don't need to worry about it. You know, it's not life changing. It's not like, your quality of life isn't going to plummet. You know, it was, and she was saying, so people will come away from the GP and then not know where to go, what to do. Yeah. So do you find that with a lot of your patients? They've been to the GP, but they've kind of just been not palmed off, but like just none the wiser, I suppose.
I think ultimately the NHS can only deal with acute things. It can only firefight. It can only deal, and my other side of the job is in acute medicine. Ironically, I've got 2 very separate sides of medicine. And in acute medicine, you do go, are you going to die now? No, fine, off you go. We've done all the bloods, we've done all the X-rays, good. And that's what the NHS is amazing at and can cope with. But those non-life-changing symptoms, which I would argue actually are probably more life-changing than anything, are not managed well because they can't.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the NHS's fault. They just can't do it. They're too overwhelmed already by the acute things to deal with someone who's going, I don't feel very well.
Yeah, of course.
And what is it that say I was a new patient, I've just been told it's probably my lifestyle or my stressful job or whatever. What if I was to come to you? Where would you start with a new patient? How would you kind of...
Good question. So, I look at everything in a patient, but the most useful thing, obviously, is blood tests.
Yeah.
So when I see a new patient, we have half an hour at least with them. We go through symptoms, so current symptoms. We talk about gynecological history. Have you been able to get pregnant? What are your periods like? And periods, going through the 3 aspects that I go through, so perimenopause, menopause, and thyroid. Most thyroid patients, for example, will have worse menopauses and worse periods throughout their life.
Oh, wow.
Just all goes together.
Oh God.
Um,
Don't get a break.
Yeah.
no,
No.
and so we'll talk about all of that. Have you been able to get pregnant? Have you had fertility issues? A lot of people will do. Do you sleep? What's your sleep like? You know, sleep is affected by hormonal issues massively. You wake up at 3 a.m. with a cold sweat and palpitations. Why? Because your hormones aren't working. What's your life like? And a lot of patients, when I talk about their life and ask them what their stress levels are like, what their mood are like, they think that I'm going to go down that route of you're just stressed.
Yeah.
But actually what interests me is, how do you manage that stress? What's your stress resilience like? Because actually what happens when hormones are not at their best is your ability to cope with that stress suddenly diminishes. So, you know, a lot of these women, particularly because there is 90% women in my clinic, a lot of them are high functioning lawyers, doctors, BBC, actors, you know, you name it. These are high functioning women coming to my clinic, and they're going, I can't cope with what I used to be able to cope with. I just can't do it. Everything stresses me out. I'm so anxious. I'm so tired. And it's that stress resilience that goes when hormones start disappearing. So we go through that. And numerous other things that crop up. And then the most important thing is we always make sure we do bloods. And going to sort of, you know, one of the things, pieces of advice we can give to patients is get some blood tests for everything. You know, it's if you're not getting the help you need, going back to that question, if you're not getting the help you need from your GP, go and get private blood tests. There's loads of providers around. We do some, obviously. But you can, for a couple of £100, you can get a full panel of sex hormones, thyroid hormones, stress hormones, and that will tell you what your endocrine, your hormonal system's like. And then you have some evidence.
Hard evidence. Yeah.
Here we go.
And you can't ignore that evidence, can you? Yeah.
No, you can't, exactly.
Okay.
I was next going to ask you about kind of the demographic of your patients, but you just obviously mentioned 90%.
Yeah.
How do these women hear about your clinic and get in touch with you?
Good question. A lot of them are word of mouth. You know, as I've already said, I started off with 28 people. I've now had 1,300 through the clinic. I don't advertise. My Google spend is very minimal.
Right.
I am on the Thyroid UK website. I don't even advertise that I do menopause and perimenopause, although clearly here I am. But I don't because I don't need to, because I would be overwhelmed. But I do perimenopause and menopause as well, because they all intertwine. So what was your question? How do people find me? That's it, generally, word of mouth.
Okay.
You know, I really have not ever had to advertise myself.
And you're fully virtual, so...
I'm fully virtual, so I have patients all over the country.
Wow.
I have patients out of the country. I obviously can't prescribe for them, but I advise for a lot of them, and give them, you know, the advice they need to help manage their own conditions. So yeah, I have seen patients all over the world, quite literally.
Wow.
You've just made it so accessible and so not easy, but you've broken it down a lot more than obviously a lot of people probably feel a barrier, and stress is elevated because of this. So I think it's great what you do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, they can literally sit in their sitting room. A lot of my patients at the end of their initial consultation will say, so what do I do? How does this work now? How do I get the bloods? How do I get the medications? It's like, well, literally, you just sit there, monitor your emails or your text messages, everything will come through your door. The medicines get shipped to them, the blood packs get shipped to them. We can arrange a nurse for them to come out to their home to take their blood. Wow. So we have made it as accessible as possible because I want to help as many people as possible.
Yeah, and it's, excuse me, and it's just, obviously, you have that one-on-one with them as well, so it must feel like just super cared for, I suppose. Like, if they've been dismissed by their GP, I know a lot, like when we were talking about this with Dr. Jenny, a lot of people kind of just start putting up with things.
Oh yeah.
And it's crazy to think that, and some of the symptoms, I mean, I've got quite a few friends now going through perimenopause. Some of them have jumped straight onto HRT. Some of them are like, I want to see what my options are, kind of things like that. But yeah, they've gone to the doctor, and the first thing when they do start getting to that perimenopause chat, it's very much HRT's pushed straight away. But for those people who want to try alternative ways, or, you know, do you find many people coming to you for more kind of that kind of more bespoke look instead of here's that solution, now off you go?
Yeah, I think they do, and I think there's lots of alternatives that can work for most people, or for some people. I think ultimately, though, if we're going down it, HRT probably is one of the better routes that we have actually to treat perimenopause. And that's because perimenopause is probably harder than menopause, and that's what research is discovering. Finally, there is some research into this. For a start, there hasn't been research into this, but there is research being done, and actually we're finding that perimenopause is actually almost harder than the actual menopause. And that's because when you're perimenopausal, obviously when we're having periods, our hormones do this anyway, right? They go up and down. I have to say that because we're on a podcast. I'm not going to say our hormones go up and down. When you get perimenopausal, that gap between the top and the bottom becomes much bigger. And so those ups and downs are far, far worse than when they were when you were in your 20s. When actually you're menopausal, you're at least level. Yeah. And if you're level and crap, at least you're level.
Yeah. Yeah, it's consistent.
It's consistently crap. But at least you're level. Whereas actually those ups and downs that we have are far worse than being consistent.
Yeah.
And so that's the aim of HRT, is to lessen that gap, to make those ups and downs smaller. There are other ways, and there's a lot of starflower oil, evening primrose oil, that has similar effects that people get on with really, really well. But most of the research is about body identical HRT, and that's the key. That's the thing that you need to know. HRT has developed a bad rep in the past, and that's because we've been using non-body identical HRTs. So what that means is estrogens and progesterones that are not what our body naturally produces.
Okay.
And so all that research, it was probably 20 years ago when I was sort of training to be a doctor, the research that said nobody should be on HRT for more than 3 to 5 years. It causes breast cancer, dementia, heart attacks, all of that. Wow. It was on the old-fashioned HRT.
So, is it like synthetic?
Yeah, it's still a bit like the pill is ultimately. The pill is ultimately synthetic hormones. Right. We now have body identical, which is literally, it's made from yam, I believe.
Yam?
Yeah.
Wow.
I believe.
Okay.
And it is literally what our bodies need. Okay. It is on what we're losing.
Wow. You know what? And this is going to sound really stupid.
No such thing.
It literally just triggered a memory in me. In the Sex and the City movie 2, when they go to Dubai, Samantha spends the whole time, she's not allowed to take her hormones with her on the plane, and she spends the whole time eating yams. Yes. She literally bathes in them and
does she? Yeah. There you go.
So that literally just really poor.
Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. But that's what it is. They come from yam.
That's crazy. Yeah. Okay. Because people are having more conversations about it now. I know. And I know I keep referring back to IBS, but there's a lot of shame attached around symptoms, especially of IBS, but also of perimenopause and things. Women are embarrassed to have hot flushes and sit there and just put up with it at their desk because they're surrounded by men. And
it's also the bleeding, for example. I remember one of my jobs, I did occupational health for a bus service. And I had a lady who now, this is going back 10 years, now I can recognise was obviously perimenopausal. And one of the symptoms that you have is heavier bleeding than normal, and often you end up flooding.
Right.
And this woman was flooding every time she had a period on a bus.
Oh, God.
And it was just, I just remember her just saying, it's just the most embarrassing thing. I can just be sat there and literally blood is pouring out. And I obviously have to get off the bus with
terrifying.
70 people.
Yeah.
And go, I'm really sorry, but I've got to go and do this. And her bosses were not massively happy.
Oh, wow.
I wrote this amazing letter for her, just saying, this is what's happening. There's nothing she can do about this. This is her life. You've got to take it easy on her. You know, she can't help this. She's not doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
But it is genuinely wrecking her life and her confidence and everything.
Like, you just wouldn't want to leave the house.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. And women do. And I think you said a bit ago that we just shut up and put up.
Yeah.
And we do.
But we are now seeing a lot more communities online talking about it, and people are kind of coming forward with their symptoms. And, you know, as soon as you can find someone you can relate to, it's, you know, a problem shared and a problem is a problem halved and all that. But do you feel like social media, for example, is a positive thing when it comes to this, or negative, or where do you stand on that?
I think it's interesting. I think it's a very positive thing on the whole. I suppose for me, there's the juxtaposition of being a doctor and wanting to remain very professional, but equally wanting to get my message across. And I do some social media. I know that I could probably develop my clinic to at least 10 times what it is with social media. But I do think it's changed. I do think it's changed the face of women's health. Ultimately. Just don't know if I want to do it.
No, that's absolutely. And like we said, you're fighting.
I kind of do, but I kind of don't.
I guess obviously social media has become almost a search engine for a lot of people, because like you say, you know, it becomes a bit of a sounding board, and you can hear other people talking about similar experiences, which obviously is a positive thing. Going back to that kind of community feel, do you know of any groups as such where people can educate themselves? Even, you know, obviously we spoke about your primary demographic being women, but even kind of men or anybody out there who just wants to educate themselves more and understand more about this.
I mean, there's loads in terms of perimenopause and menopause these days. I mean, Dr. Newson has done so much for the menopause and getting HRT and that out there for the menopausal women. In terms of thyroid, and obviously I have men and women for thyroid disease. Thyroid UK is probably one of the best factual information that we've got, but there are loads of online groups.
And how would people find you? Is it just what are you on? You know, website? I
have a website, so I www.thyroidclinic.co.uk. Very imaginatively named. It does what it says on the tin. But I do menopause and perimenopause. You know, there's a triangle of hormones which I've alluded to that all interact: thyroid, stress hormones, sex hormones. So I have lots of women who think they may have a thyroid issue who come to me, and actually we discover it's perimenopause or menopause. So hence why I just have never been able to separate the two, really. I just don't advertise it, as I said. I do have social. I don't put very much up on that.
We can help you out, don't worry.
I have Facebook and I have Twitter and I sort of have an Instagram.
Okay, well,
don't do much.
We'll obviously drop the website underneath the podcast when we share it. But thank you so much.
That's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
I can't believe. I mean, I knew you were very, very, very good and talented at what you did, but 1,300 patients.
That's incredible.
I know, it's a bit bonkers.
Yeah.
Such a short amount of time as well.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, a bit overwhelming.
But thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Dr. Conway.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank
That's
you.
a pleasure.